Entitled woman struck Britsh royal guard believing he'd stay silent. What followed left everyone stunned. It was a bright and clear morning in London, the kind that seemed perfect for sightseeing. The streets were alive with the hum of tourists, chatter, and the occasional call of street vendors selling souvenirs. People moved in groups, cameras swinging from their necks, trying to capture every angle of the historic city. Among the most popular attractions on this sunny day was Buckingham Palace, the official residence of the British monarch. Visitors had come from all over the world, eager to see the grandeur of the palace and the famous changing of the guard ceremony, an event that drew crowds daily. Among these visitors was a woman in her mid-30s. She had traveled from another country to experience London for the first time. Her excitement was evident in the way she walked briskly along the palace gates, taking in every detail: the golden fences, the neatly trimmed gardens, and the regal facade of the building itself. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity, and her camera was ready to capture every moment. She had heard so much about the guards at Buckingham Palace. Their perfectly tailored red tunics, tall black bearskin hats, and disciplined behavior fascinated her. She had seen them in pictures and on television, standing motionless for hours, but now she wanted to witness it in real life. The square in front of the palace was already crowded. Families with children perched on their parents' shoulders, groups of friends chatting excitedly, and individual tourists moving carefully to find the perfect spot to view the ceremony. The air was filled with a mixture of anticipation and awe. Street performers added a touch of liveliness, playing soft melodies on their instruments, blending into the buzz of the crowd. The woman made her way through the throng, trying to get closer to the front, eager not to miss a single detail. She was not alone in her admiration. The crowd around her shared the same sense of wonder and respect for the palace and its traditions. The guards had already assembled in their formation. They moved with a precision that seemed almost mechanical, yet elegant. Every movement was deliberate, every step in sync with the others, and every face remained expressionless, hiding any emotion. The woman watched them intently, fascinated by their discipline and the sense of history they represented. These were not just soldiers. They were symbols of a tradition that had been carefully maintained for centuries. She had read about the rules the guards followed, the hours they stood without moving, and the strict codes of conduct they observed. Yet seeing it in person felt different. It was almost magical. As she moved closer to the front, she noticed how the crowd seemed to instinctively respect the guards. People whispered instead of speaking loudly, took careful steps to avoid bumping into them, and often paused to marvel at the meticulous uniform details. The woman felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. Being so close to a living symbol of history was thrilling, but it also made her aware of the boundaries that needed to be respected. She adjusted her camera, making sure it was ready to capture a clear shot. Suddenly, she found herself standing almost directly in front of one of the guards. He was tall, with a stoic expression that did not change even when children waved at him or tourists tried to get his attention. His black bearskin hat seemed impossibly tall, and the red tunic stood out vividly against the gray stone of the palace. His posture was perfect, shoulders straight, hands at his sides, eyes looking forward. The woman felt a strange mix of awe and playfulness. She had seen people touch guards or try to make them laugh in online videos, often thinking it was harmless fun. A small, impulsive thought crossed her mind. What if she lightly tapped him on the shoulder, just to see what would happen? Surely, she thought, he would ignore it, just like all the others in the videos she had seen. For a moment, the crowd seemed to fade from her attention. She focused solely on the guard in front of her. Everything about him, the uniform, the posture, the air of authority, made him appear untouchable, almost as if he were part of the palace itself. Her hand lifted almost instinctively. She tapped him lightly on the shoulder, expecting nothing more than a stiff, formal glance. In her mind, it was a small act, playful and harmless. She thought it would be funny if he didn't react at all, imagining the stories she could tell her friends afterward about testing a royal guard. The moment her hand made contact, the air seemed to shift slightly. The guard did not flinch or react in the way the woman had anticipated. He remained perfectly still, his expression unchanged, his eyes fixed straight ahead. The woman blinked, unsure of what she had expected. The crowd around her, who had been watching with curiosity, began to murmur. Some whispered in surprise, others laughed nervously, unsure if the situation was part of a performance or something real. Cameras clicked, and phones were raised to record the unusual moment. The woman smiled nervously, believing she had gotten away with it. In her mind, she thought, "See, nothing happened, just like in the videos." She stepped back slightly, trying to blend in with the crowd again, feeling a sense of mischievous accomplishment. Yet beneath her smile, a small seed of doubt had begun to grow. Something about the guard's calm, unwavering presence was different from what she had imagined. He had not reacted, yes, but his stillness carried a quiet power, a subtle reminder that tradition and discipline were not to be underestimated. Around her, the crowd's whispers grew louder. Some people pointed discreetly, exchanging shocked looks. Parents held their children closer, explaining quietly why it was important to respect the guards. The woman could feel the attention of the people around her, and for the first time, she realized that her small act had drawn more notice than she had expected. She felt a mix of embarrassment and curiosity, unsure whether to apologize immediately or pretend it had never happened. The guard continued his duty, unaffected outwardly by the contact. Yet, the professional discipline he displayed seemed to fill the space around him. The woman watched as he moved slightly, not in response to her but in perfect synchronization with the other guards. Each step, each motion was precise, almost hypnotic in its rhythm. She began to understand why people admired them so much, not just for their uniforms or ceremonies, but for their ability to maintain composure in any situation, no matter how unusual or challenging. As the ceremony continued, the woman's attention shifted between the guard and the other tourists. She noticed the care people took to follow rules, the respect for tradition, and the quiet authority that the guards held over the square. What had started as a playful, impulsive act now felt different. She realized that she had momentarily stepped into a world of history, discipline, and expectations far beyond her understanding. Her earlier confidence gave way to a sense of humility, and she began to watch quietly, soaking in every detail without wanting to interfere again. By the time the changing of the guard began in full, with precise marching and ceremonial music, the woman had settled into the rhythm of the crowd. She still observed the guard she had tapped, marveling at his calm and unwavering presence. The moment of impulsive action had passed, leaving behind a lesson in patience, respect, and the power of tradition. She took photographs, not for the sake of mischief, but to remember the experience, the awe of being in the presence of such disciplined professionalism, and the realization that even small actions can have unexpected consequences. When the ceremony concluded, the crowd began to disperse slowly. The woman lingered, reflecting on the brief interaction and the sense of wonder she had felt. What had started as a playful, impulsive moment had transformed into an appreciation for history, tradition, and the people who maintain it. The royal guard returned to his post with the same unwavering focus, and she realized that their strength was not just in appearance, but in the discipline, respect, and patience they embodied. As she walked away from the palace gates, the woman felt a mixture of relief, awe, and curiosity. She had learned, in a single moment, the value of restraint and the power of presence. The experience left an impression she knew would stay with her long after leaving London. She glanced back one last time at the guards, now walking in formation toward their barracks, and felt a quiet admiration for the men and women who served as living symbols of history, embodying centuries of tradition in every step, every gesture, and every silent moment of watchful care. The woman's light tap on the guard's shoulder had set off a ripple of reactions, far beyond what she had expected. At first there was silence, a stillness that seemed to hang in the air, heavier than the usual excitement of the palace square. The royal guard stood motionless, his posture unchanged, his face calm and unreadable. It was as if nothing had happened. But for the woman, that stillness was anything but ordinary. Her heartbeat quickened, a mix of nervousness and curiosity coursing through her. She had expected perhaps a glance, a small reaction, maybe even a humorous response like she had seen in online videos. Yet here in front of her eyes, the guard remained completely unaffected. The crowd around her began to notice. At first, subtle glances were exchanged, people raising their eyebrows, whispering to one another, unsure of whether they had really seen what had just happened. A few onlookers leaned closer to see if the interaction was part of some performance. Others, already familiar with the strict rules of palace etiquette, shook their heads in mild disbelief, clearly expecting that someone would soon intervene. Cameras clicked quietly, capturing the tension that was building in the square. Smartphones were raised as tourists attempted to document the rare and unusual moment. The woman smiled nervously. In her mind, she thought she had pulled off a harmless little trick, perhaps even a playful test of the guard's discipline. He didn't even notice, she thought. This is perfect. No harm done. She took a small step back, adjusting her camera as if to act naturally, to blend into the crowd again. But the longer she stared, the more she realized that the guard's calm demeanor was not just indifference. It carried a quiet power, a strength that made her feel both small and exposed. There was something unspoken in the way he held himself, a silent authority that commanded respect without a word. Around her, the crowd's whispers grew. People began murmuring about the unexpected incident, their voices low but urgent. "Did you see that?" a man whispered to his friend. "She actually touched him." "I can't believe she did that," a woman said quietly, glancing at the woman in the red jacket. Some in the crowd laughed nervously, unsure whether to be amused or concerned. Children tugged at their parents, pointing and asking questions. Parents leaned down, explaining softly why the royal guards were to be respected, and why touching them, even lightly, was inappropriate. The murmurs spread quickly, creating a gentle buzz of tension that filled the square. The woman began to feel the weight of attention. Eyes were on her now, not just from the guard, but from the people surrounding her. She had expected to be unnoticed, hidden among the hundreds of tourists, blending into the excitement of the ceremony. But now she realized that her impulsive action had made her the center of attention. She could feel the curious stares of strangers, some judging, some fascinated. Her confidence wavered. The playful thrill she had felt earlier began to transform into a mix of embarrassment and apprehension. Meanwhile, the guard remained still, his focus unwavering. His eyes did not flicker toward her, nor did he shift his posture. Yet there was an unmistakable intensity in his presence. It was as if his calmness itself was a message, a reminder that he was trained to remain composed, no matter what disruptions might occur. The woman noticed this and felt a sudden respect rising within her. She realized that her small act, though impulsive, had tested more than just a man in uniform. It had tested a tradition, a discipline, and a history that had been maintained for generations. The sound of the ceremonial music began to fill the square once more, marking the continuation of the changing of the guard. Soldiers marched in perfect synchronization, their boots striking the stone in steady rhythm. The sound echoed across the square, drawing the crowd's attention back to the formal ceremony. Some of the tourists shifted their focus, but many still kept an eye on the interaction between the woman and the guard. Cameras continued to click as people captured both the ceremony and the unexpected moment that had just unfolded. The woman tried to shift her attention as well, pretending to observe the marching soldiers, yet she could not completely ignore the guard she had tapped. She found herself studying him in detail, the meticulous stitching of his uniform, the careful alignment of every button, the polished shine of his boots. Everything about him seemed precise and intentional, a reflection of years of training and discipline. The earlier sense of mischief that had driven her action now felt out of place. She began to feel the seriousness of the situation, the unspoken rules that governed the palace, and the importance of respecting them. Some of the crowd began to murmur louder. Conversations swirled around her, a mixture of astonishment and concern. "She shouldn't have done that," one tourist whispered. "I wonder if she will get in trouble," another said, glancing at the woman nervously. The woman felt their attention keenly. She could hear snippets of conversation, words that seemed to amplify the gravity of her action. The playful scenario she had imagined was now clearly not what was unfolding. She felt a lump of anxiety form in her throat. The guard's calmness, combined with the crowd's reactions, created a tension that was almost tangible. The woman realized that this moment would be remembered by many who were present. It was no longer just a personal experience. It had become part of a public spectacle. The realization made her heart beat faster. She had underestimated not only the guard's professionalism, but also the awareness of the crowd. Every eye in the square seemed to be watching, and every camera captured the story as it unfolded. Security personnel had begun to notice the commotion. They did not rush forward aggressively, as the situation was not violent, but they started moving discreetly toward the area. Their presence added another layer of tension. The woman's smile faded further as she realized that her small act could have consequences beyond what she had imagined. The excitement and playfulness she had felt in the moment were replaced by a growing sense of vulnerability. Around her, the crowd's focus remained divided between the guard, the ceremony, and her. People whispered, pointed, and occasionally shook their heads. Some of the onlookers raised their phones higher, capturing the unusual interaction from different angles. Children watched in curiosity, and parents tried to explain in simple terms the importance of respecting the guards. The woman felt a strange mix of embarrassment and fascination. She had wanted a brief moment of fun, but instead she had become part of a living lesson in discipline, tradition, and composure. Despite all of this, the guard did not react outwardly. His calmness remained unshaken, a testament to his training and his commitment to duty. The woman noticed the way his eyes stayed forward, ignoring the distraction, and she felt a growing sense of respect for him. She began to understand the meaning of the guard's discipline, not just standing still for hours or marching in perfect formation, but embodying patience, restraint, and silent authority. The more she observed, the more she realized that the stillness she had first interpreted as indifference was, in fact, strength. Finally, after what felt like several minutes but was likely only seconds, the woman took a step back, her hands slightly trembling. She wanted to distance herself, to fade into the crowd and avoid drawing more attention. Her camera clicked once more, capturing a final image of the guard before she turned her focus elsewhere. She could feel the eyes of strangers following her, some curious, some critical, some simply fascinated. The moment had ended, but its impact lingered in her mind. As the changing of the guard continued, the woman moved slightly away from the immediate area, blending back into the crowd. She felt a mixture of relief, awe, and lingering tension. The playful act she had committed had transformed into a lesson she had not expected to learn. Respect, patience, and professionalism could speak more powerfully than any words. The crowd around her gradually dispersed, but she remained, quietly observing, reflecting on the discipline she had witnessed and the quiet authority of the man she had briefly tested. By the time the ceremony ended, she had come to a realization that would stay with her long after she left the palace. The brief moment of impulsiveness had become an encounter with history, tradition, and an extraordinary display of human composure. She had learned in a single experience that actions, even small ones, could ripple outward, affecting not only herself but everyone around her. The royal guard returned to his duties with the same unwavering focus, and the woman left the square with a newfound respect for the men and women who serve as symbols of tradition, discipline, and history. The brief moment of impulsive mischief had passed, but it did not go unnoticed. Even as the woman tried to melt back into the crowd, the events she had set in motion were quietly gaining attention. The royal guard she had tapped had returned to his duties with calm precision, but behind the disciplined facade, his actions had already triggered a chain of responses that would soon make the woman realize that her playful experiment had consequences far beyond her imagination. Palace security, always vigilant and trained to respond quickly, had been watching the crowd. At first, they observed discreetly, noting the woman's actions without drawing attention. They did not need to rush forward immediately. The situation was not violent. Yet, the moment she had touched the guard had been recorded by multiple security cameras placed strategically around the palace grounds. Every angle of the interaction was captured, leaving no doubt about what had occurred. In their radios, officers quietly communicated the situation, alerting one another without disturbing the ongoing ceremony. The woman, still standing among the crowd, had a growing sense that something was not right. At first, she thought it was just her own imagination, a flutter of guilt over a minor prank. But then she noticed subtle changes in the air around her. The people near her were no longer whispering excitedly or laughing nervously. Instead, they were looking at her with a mixture of curiosity and caution. Some had shifted slightly, making way as if expecting someone to approach. Even the children, previously fascinated by the spectacle of the guards, seemed to sense a tension in the crowd. It was then that she noticed the first security officer moving toward her. He was dressed in plain clothes, but his demeanor was unmistakable, calm, professional, and focused. His eyes were trained on her as he navigated through the crowd with purpose, making his way steadily toward her position. The woman's heart began to race. For a moment, she froze, unsure whether to step forward, apologize, or try to blend in. She realized she could no longer escape the consequences of her actions by pretending nothing had happened. The officer reached her within moments, his movements deliberate and unhurried. He spoke in a low, measured tone, keeping his voice calm so as not to startle the crowd. "Ma'am," he said, "I need you to come with me for a moment." There was no anger in his voice, only authority. The woman's initial instinct was to protest, to claim it had been harmless, but the seriousness of his expression stopped her. She nodded silently, realizing that any argument would only make the situation worse. The crowd watched in quiet anticipation, sensing that something significant was unfolding. As the officer guided her away from the front of the crowd, she became acutely aware of the eyes of the public upon her. Tourists, families, and children followed with quiet curiosity, taking in every step. Cameras clicked, capturing the scene as she moved past the polished stone of the palace courtyard. The reality of her situation began to sink in. This was no longer a playful experiment or a harmless prank. She had violated the rules of one of the most historic and respected institutions in the world. Every instinct she had relied on, the assumption that the guard would ignore her, had been mistaken. The guard she had tapped remained at his post, continuing his duty with the same calm precision as before. Yet, the effect of his silent response was now fully evident. His restraint had ensured that the situation did not escalate into a confrontation, but it had also signaled to the woman, the crowd, and the security officers that her actions could not be ignored. She felt a mixture of admiration and guilt. Admiration for the guard's discipline, and guilt for underestimating the seriousness of her own behavior. The officer led her to a quieter area near the palace gates, away from the main crowd. Here, other security personnel were waiting, their presence calm but unmistakably authoritative. They did not raise their voices or act aggressively. Their professionalism was evident in every gesture. One of the officers began explaining the situation, speaking slowly so that the woman could understand the seriousness of her action. He described the rules governing interactions with the royal guards, emphasizing that they were not mere symbols or props for amusement. They were active members of the Queen's Guard, representing centuries of history and tradition. The woman listened, her initial nervousness deepening into a growing sense of accountability. She had thought that a light tap on the shoulder would be inconsequential, but now she realized how wrong she had been. Her action had not only drawn attention from the public, but had also required the intervention of trained security officers and had been fully documented by surveillance cameras. The officers were patient and professional, giving her the opportunity to understand the implications of her behavior without embarrassment or confrontation. While the explanation continued, the woman could hear murmurs from the crowd nearby. Some tourists whispered among themselves, speculating about what had occurred. Others looked on with fascination, capturing the interaction on their phones. She realized that her impulsive moment had become part of the public spectacle, and that people were now observing not just the guards, but also her response to the situation. This awareness added to her sense of responsibility. She was no longer an anonymous tourist. She had become the subject of attention and scrutiny. The officers explained that her behavior, though not violent, could be classified as assault under palace rules. They described the possible consequences, ranging from formal warnings to more serious legal action, depending on the assessment of authorities. The woman's stomach tightened as the reality of the situation fully sank in. What had begun as a moment of playful curiosity was now clearly a matter of accountability. She realized she would need to cooperate fully and acknowledge her mistake. The officers made it clear that cooperation and honesty would be considered favorably, reinforcing the importance of respect for both tradition and authority. Throughout this, the royal guard remained at his post, a silent reminder of discipline and professionalism. The woman could not help but reflect on the calmness with which he had handled the initial contact. His restraint had prevented what could have been a chaotic situation, and it had allowed the security personnel to address the matter calmly and effectively. She realized that his actions, though quiet and understated, had played a crucial role in maintaining order and preventing escalation. It was a lesson she would not forget. True strength often lies in calm, measured responses rather than reactionary impulses. The woman apologized sincerely to the officers, acknowledging her mistake and expressing her regret. She explained that she had not intended to cause harm, but rather had acted on a moment of curiosity and playfulness. The officers listened, nodding as they assessed her sincerity. They emphasized that while her explanation was appreciated, the rules and traditions of Buckingham Palace were non-negotiable. Respect for the guards and the ceremony was paramount, and every visitor had a responsibility to understand and observe these guidelines. As she stood there, reflecting on the series of events, she began to understand the broader implications of her actions. It was not just about a single tap on the shoulder. It was about the centuries of tradition that the royal guards represented, the discipline required to maintain that tradition, and the respect that visitors owed to such institutions. The woman felt a growing sense of humility, recognizing that she had briefly crossed a line that could have been avoided with a simple awareness of boundaries. After a few minutes, the officers allowed her to return to the main area, but with a clear understanding that her actions were being documented. and that she would need to comply with any further instructions from palace authorities if required. She walked back through the courtyard, her steps slower and more measured than before. The crowd watched her, and she could sense the curiosity and judgment in their eyes. This time, she moved not with playful mischief, but with a quiet awareness of her surroundings and the importance of respect. The royal guard remained a steady presence in her mind as she rejoined the crowd. His calm, unshakable demeanor had not only prevented an immediate escalation, but had also delivered a powerful lesson in patience, discipline, and silent authority. She reflected on the contrast between her impulsive behavior and his composed response, understanding for the first time the true meaning of professionalism. The brief moment of contact, once trivial in her mind, had transformed into an unforgettable lesson on responsibility and respect. By the time she left the immediate area of the palace gates, the woman had internalized the consequences of her actions. She realized that playful curiosity, when combined with ignorance of rules and tradition, could lead to unintended complications. Yet, through the calm intervention of the royal guard and the measured response of the security officers, she had been given an opportunity to learn, reflect, and correct her behavior. It was a lesson in humility, respect, and the power of composure, one that would remain with her far longer than the brief moment of mischief that had started it all. News of the unusual incident at Buckingham Palace spread quickly, even though only a few people had witnessed it firsthand. In the age of smartphones and social media, a single video could reach thousands in minutes, and that was exactly what happened. Multiple tourists had recorded the brief interaction between the woman and the royal guard, capturing the moment she lightly tapped his shoulder and the guard's calm, unwavering response. Within hours, the videos were circulating online, shared across social media platforms, accompanied by comments expressing shock, disbelief, and admiration. People around the world were both fascinated and amused by the unexpected scene. The woman, who had thought the incident would fade into the background of a busy tourist day, soon realized that her actions had captured much more attention than she had imagined. As she scrolled through her phone later that day, she saw dozens of posts and videos showing her brief interaction with the guard. Some viewers praised the guard for his incredible discipline and composure, noting how he had not reacted even when touched. Others commented on the audacity of the woman's actions, some disapprovingly and some more humorously, but the overall reaction was one of surprise and curiosity. She began to understand that the consequences of her impulsive act extended far beyond the palace gates. The story quickly caught the attention of local news outlets. Journalists arrived at the palace to gather information, interviewing witnesses and palace officials about the incident. The coverage highlighted both the professionalism of the royal guards and the woman's unexpected misstep. Reports described how the guards maintained centuries-old traditions of discipline, how security personnel intervened quietly yet effectively, and how the crowd reacted in a mixture of astonishment and fascination. The tone of the news stories emphasized the importance of respecting ceremonial practices, while also noting the unusual nature of the encounter. Authorities confirmed that the woman had been approached by palace security and that her actions had been recorded by multiple cameras. While her behavior was not violent, it was considered a breach of palace rules, and officials made it clear that all visitors were expected to respect the guards and the ceremonies. The news outlets carefully reported the facts without sensationalism, focusing on the lessons learned rather than exaggerating the incident. Still, the story captured the public's imagination, sparking conversations both online and in daily life about respect, boundaries, and tradition. Social media became a particularly lively forum for discussion. People from around the world debated the incident, sharing their opinions about what the woman had done and how the royal guard had handled it. Many praised the guard's restraint, calling it a remarkable example of patience and professionalism. Some highlighted the lessons in respect for tradition, while others commented on the woman's impulsiveness and the consequences she faced. Hashtags related to the incident trended for a short time, with users sharing images, videos, and humorous commentary. The woman, now aware of the global attention her actions had drawn, felt a mix of embarrassment and reflection. Legal experts were also consulted in some news reports to explain the potential consequences of such actions. They clarified that touching a royal guard, even lightly, could be considered assault under the law because guards are on official duty and represent a public institution. While cases like this were rare, authorities had to maintain clear rules to protect the integrity of the palace and the safety of its staff. Experts emphasized that the law was not meant to punish tourists harshly, but to reinforce the importance of following guidelines and respecting public figures in official roles. The woman absorbed this information with a growing sense of responsibility, realizing that even seemingly small actions could have legal implications. Meanwhile, the public's fascination with the story continued to grow. Tourists who had been present that day shared their accounts of the incident, describing how the woman had tapped the guard and how the crowd had reacted in surprise. Some recalled how the guard had remained completely calm, while others mentioned the quiet professionalism of the security officers as they guided the woman away. These personal accounts added depth to the story, creating a vivid picture of the incident that went far beyond the simple video clips circulating online. Readers and viewers could almost feel the tension of the moment and understand the lessons that unfolded. For the woman herself, the public and media attention was both humbling and enlightening. She reflected on her actions, realizing that her initial assumption, that the guard would ignore her, had been naive. She had underestimated the discipline and authority of the royal guards, as well as the awareness of the crowd. She also understood that her playful impulse had inadvertently become a public lesson in respect and responsibility. While she had felt embarrassed at first, she gradually came to appreciate the value of the experience. It had taught her something that she could never have learned simply by reading about the palace or watching videos online. Palace officials used the incident as an opportunity to educate the public about the importance of respecting ceremonial practices. They highlighted the long history of the royal guards, explaining that their discipline, training, and composure were integral to maintaining centuries-old traditions. Visitors were reminded that the guards were not just symbols or photo opportunities, but active members of a respected institution whose work required focus, patience, and professionalism. This educational approach helped frame the incident in a way that emphasized learning and reflection rather than punishment. In addition to the official response, discussions about etiquette and behavior in public spaces began to emerge. Schools, cultural organizations, and travel blogs used the incident as a case study in respecting rules, boundaries, and traditions while visiting historic sites. The story became a cautionary tale, demonstrating that even minor actions could have broader social and legal consequences. It encouraged travelers to be more mindful of the spaces they visited and the people they encountered, reinforcing the idea that respect is essential in any interaction. Despite the seriousness of the situation, many commentators emphasized the positive aspects of the incident. The guard's unwavering discipline was celebrated as an example of professionalism and patience. The woman's willingness to cooperate with authorities and reflect on her behavior was also highlighted as an important lesson in accountability. Together, these elements of the story demonstrated how a challenging situation could be transformed into an opportunity for learning, personal growth, and public awareness. By the end of the week, the incident had become a well-known story both locally and internationally. Videos and articles continued to circulate, with people sharing their reactions and interpretations. The woman had become, unintentionally, part of a larger narrative about discipline, respect, and the importance of tradition. She understood that her actions had consequences beyond the immediate moment, affecting not only herself, but also the perception of visitors and the reputation of one of the world's most famous institutions. For many, the story served as a reminder that appearances can be deceiving. The guard's silence had initially seemed like indifference, but it was actually a display of extraordinary self-control and professionalism. The woman's impulsive act, while minor, had highlighted the contrast between playful curiosity and disciplined restraint. Observers reflected on how easily small actions could ripple outward, affecting people, institutions, and public perceptions in ways that were unexpected and significant. Ultimately, the incident became more than just a news story or viral video. It evolved into a broader lesson about respect, discipline, and the importance of thinking before acting. The woman had learned firsthand that her choices carried consequences, both in the immediate moment and in the eyes of the public. She had also come to appreciate the extraordinary commitment of the royal guards, whose quiet presence and unwavering professionalism had maintained order and dignity in the face of disruption. The public reaction, the media coverage, and the discussion sparked by the incident all contributed to a larger understanding of the importance of respect for tradition. It reminded people that even in moments of curiosity or playfulness, boundaries existed for good reasons. The story encouraged reflection, empathy, and awareness, reinforcing the idea that actions, no matter how small, can have wide-reaching effects. For the woman, it became a personal story of growth and learning, a lesson she would carry with her long after leaving London. As the weeks passed, the initial excitement of the story faded, but the lessons endured. The woman continued her travels, now more mindful of her surroundings and the importance of respect in public spaces. She shared her experience with friends and family, emphasizing how one small act could teach profound lessons about discipline, professionalism, and the ripple effect of our choices. The incident remained a vivid memory, one that would shape her understanding of respect and responsibility for years to come. Through it all, the Royal Guard remained a quiet, steadfast symbol of patience, discipline, and composure. His silent response to an unexpected challenge had captured the attention of the world and had transformed a playful act into a moment of reflection for countless observers. The woman, now aware of the broader impact of her actions, could not help but admire his professionalism and the lessons it had imparted. What had begun as a minor impulsive act had evolved into an unforgettable experience, illustrating the power of discipline, respect, and thoughtful reflection. After the whirlwind of media attention, public commentary, and the quiet but firm intervention of palace security, the woman found herself reflecting deeply on everything that had happened. What had started as a playful, impulsive act, a simple tap on the shoulder of a royal guard, had grown into a life-changing experience. She realized that her actions, although minor in her mind at first, had consequences that extended far beyond that brief moment at Buckingham Palace. She thought about the calm, unshakable presence of the guard and the measured, professional response of the officers who had intervened. These were lessons in discipline, patience, and responsibility that she would never forget. The woman returned to her hotel room later that evening, exhausted yet thoughtful. She reviewed the photos and videos she had taken, seeing them now in a completely new light. Previously, they had been souvenirs of her trip, casual reminders of a day at the palace. Now they carried the weight of reflection and humility. She noticed the expressions of the tourists in the crowd, the poised stance of the guard, and the subtle but clear attention of the security personnel. Each image told a story far greater than the visual moment captured, It was a story of discipline meeting impulsiveness, patience meeting curiosity, and tradition meeting modern awareness. As she sat quietly, the woman considered the personal lessons she had learned. First, she recognized the importance of thinking before acting. In her excitement and curiosity, she had assumed that her playful gesture would go unnoticed, or at least be forgiven. Yet in reality, her small action had created a situation that demanded attention from multiple levels of authority and had been documented for public record. She realized that even seemingly minor acts could have larger consequences, and that awareness of context and surroundings was essential in any interaction, especially in historically and culturally significant settings. The second lesson she reflected upon was the value of respect for tradition, for authority, and for people performing their duties. The royal guard's calm and professional demeanor had conveyed more than words ever could. He had not reacted aggressively, nor had he needed to. His silence and discipline spoke volumes, illustrating the power of composure, patience, and unwavering commitment. She realized that respect was not simply about following rules, but about understanding the purpose and significance behind them. The guard's behavior had taught her that true authority is expressed not through force, but through self-control and consistency. She also thought about the wider implications of the incident. The story had reached countless people through news outlets and social media. Many had admired the guard's professionalism. Some had critiqued her impulsive act, and others had debated the lessons to be learned. In that way, her single moment of misjudgment had unintentionally contributed to a broader conversation about respect, etiquette, and the importance of tradition. She was humbled by the thought that her actions could spark discussion and reflection among so many people, and it made her more mindful of her behavior going forward. The woman decided to take proactive steps to make amends for her actions. She reached out to the palace authorities through the appropriate channels, expressing her sincere apologies for her behavior. In her letter, she explained that she had acted impulsively, without understanding the full significance of the royal guard's role, and she emphasized her respect for the traditions she had momentarily disrupted. Her words were thoughtful and reflective, conveying a genuine understanding of the situation and a commitment to learning from her experience. While she knew that formal consequences had already been addressed, the act of writing her apology helped her internalize the lessons she had learned. In addition to her personal reflection and apology, the woman began to share her experience with others in a constructive way. She spoke to fellow travelers, recounting the incident not as a story of embarrassment, but as a story of learning and growth. She emphasized the importance of respecting cultural and historical traditions, understanding the significance of roles like the Royal Guard, and being aware of one's surroundings when in public spaces. Her narrative became a cautionary tale, one that encouraged mindfulness, humility, and a deeper appreciation for discipline and professionalism. Over time, she noticed how the experience shaped her behavior in subtle but meaningful ways. During the remainder of her trip, she approached every situation with greater awareness, carefully observing rules, cultural norms, and social expectations. She became more patient, more thoughtful, and more respectful of the people she encountered. Even small interactions, waiting in lines, observing ceremonies, or interacting with staff, were now approached with consideration and care. The incident at Buckingham Palace had instilled in her a lasting sense of mindfulness and responsibility, lessons that she would carry far beyond her travels. The woman also reflected on the extraordinary professionalism of the Royal Guard. Standing for hours, performing precise ceremonial duties, and maintaining composure despite distractions required not only physical endurance but mental strength as well. She marveled at how the guard had handled her unexpected act of mischief without breaking character, reacting with perfect discipline rather than frustration. It became clear to her that his role was about far more than appearance. It was a commitment to history, tradition, and duty, and it demanded respect. His example had become a model for behavior that she could apply in her own life: calmness in the face of challenges, patience under pressure, and thoughtful consideration before reacting. The public response also helped reinforce the lessons she had learned. Many people praised the guard's restraint, highlighting the importance of patience and composure. Social media conversations, news articles, and discussions in her home country all emphasized respect for authority and the power of disciplined behavior. By observing the reactions of others, the woman understood that her actions had consequences not only for herself, but also for how people perceived public institutions, cultural traditions, and even tourism in general. This awareness strengthened her understanding of accountability and the impact of one's behavior in public spaces. Looking back, the woman realized that the incident had transformed from a moment of embarrassment into a meaningful life experience. It had taught her humility, the value of reflection, and the importance of learning from mistakes. She recognized that human curiosity and playfulness were natural, but they needed to be balanced with respect and awareness. She also realized that authority and tradition, while sometimes appearing rigid or unapproachable, were deserving of understanding and consideration. The brief encounter had provided her with lessons that would shape not only her behavior, but also her perspective on human interaction, cultural norms, and personal responsibility. In her mind, the woman replayed the events repeatedly, each time noticing new details she had overlooked before. She remembered the moment she had tapped the guard's shoulder, the silence that followed, the reaction of the crowd, and the measured intervention of security officers. Each element of the sequence revealed a layer of insight into human behavior, societal expectations, and the power of disciplined action. She reflected on how a single impulsive act could ripple outward, touching not only herself but also strangers, institutions, and even the wider public consciousness. By the end of her trip, the woman felt a sense of closure. She had learned from her mistake, expressed genuine remorse, and internalized lessons about respect, responsibility, and awareness. Her journey had evolved from a typical tourist experience into a transformative encounter that left a lasting impression on her. She understood that the incident at Buckingham Palace, while brief, had provided her with insights that she could apply to her life in countless ways. In interactions with others, in respecting traditions and institutions, and in approaching challenges with patience and thoughtfulness. As she boarded her flight home, the woman carried with her a sense of gratitude for the lessons she had learned. She thought about the royal guard, standing silently at his post, embodying discipline and patience. She thought about the officers, guiding her calmly and professionally, ensuring that the situation was resolved without conflict. She thought about the crowd, observing and reacting in ways that reflected both curiosity and societal norms. Each element of the experience contributed to a powerful, lasting memory that would influence her behavior, values, and understanding of responsibility for the rest of her life. Even years later, the woman would recall the day she lightly tapped the shoulder of a royal guard. It would not be remembered merely as an embarrassing moment, but as a defining experience that taught her humility, awareness, and respect. She would recall the calm authority of the guard, the professional intervention of the officers, and the reactions of the crowd. And she would remember the personal growth that emerged from that brief, unplanned encounter. What had started as a moment of impulsive curiosity had ultimately become a story of reflection, learning, and lasting change. A reminder that our actions, however small, can have profound lessons if we take the time to understand them.